Okay, so today we are doing something really different because usually my topics are self-generated. But I've gotten a number of requests from some of you to put a negotiation analysis on this really big ongoing pay controversy involving the first voice actor from the video game Bayonetta. Now, if you are a gamer, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and you probably have some pretty strong views on who's right and who's wrong, and maybe on how it's going to affect the pay of video game voice actors going forward. And if you're not a gamer, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But even if you are a non-gamer, stay tuned, because if you are interested in issues like pay equity, pay transparency, salary negotiations, and the role of gender and unions, then this video is chock full of information for you. Because today I take on salary negotiations, Bayonetta 3, and whether and when to go public. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School. I'm the founder and former director of Harvard Law School's Negotiation and Mediation Clinical Program and the founder of the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. Let's go. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with Bayonetta 3 and the controversy surrounding it over the past few weeks, let me do a quick rundown. So Bayonetta is a popular, although somewhat niche Nintendo video game produced by Platinum Games. And about 2 weeks before the release of Bayonetta 3, so that was on October 28th, the original voice actor of Bayonetta, whose name is Hellena Taylor, dropped a tweet, actually it was a series of tweets, alleging that she had been dropped as the lead voice actor of Bayonetta because she refused to accept what she said was an unconscionable salary of a mere paltry $4,000 for her services. So, according to Taylor's first tweet, the franchise had made $450 million in profits on earlier versions of the game. And so she basically said giving her $4,000 for her services was immoral and completely inappropriate. But she went farther than that. She actually called on fans of Bayonetta to not buy Bayonetta 3 and instead donate that money to charity. Now, it turns out that the new voice actor for Bayonetta, her name is Jennifer Hale. Hellena said that Jennifer had no right to take on the role of Bayonetta or sign anything as if she were Bayonetta because the only Bayonetta was Hellena. So it turns out that Jennifer Hale is actually well known in the video game voice actor world as somebody who has worked really hard to advocate for fair pay for video game actors. And she ends up sending out a tweet basically saying that she is in solidarity with all video game voice actors around fair pay issues, that she couldn't say more because of a non-disclosure agreement, but that it was her sincere hope that the parties to the dispute, so basically Hellena Taylor and Platinum Games, could resolve their differences amicably. Now, as an aside, these parties, to the degree they're still in dispute, could reach out to a mediator or someone like me. But let's put that aside for now, because the firestorm that erupted from Hellena Taylor's tweet has barely subsided since then. And indeed, as of this recording, Hellena Taylor's tweet has more than 11 million views. This story has also unleashed literally thousands of tweets and Reddit comments and various statements about alleged unfairness of pay for video game actors. But the story isn't quite over because the plot thickened when Bloomberg News actually released a report saying that Taylor had not been fully truthful or transparent in her original tweet. Indeed, according to reports, she had actually been offered $15,000 for the voice of Bayonetta 3, and it was only when she resisted that Platinum offered her a lesser role for $4,000. In addition, most in the gaming industry agreed that Taylor's estimate that Platinum had made $450 million on Bayonetta was wildly inaccurate, and most estimated that the profits were $185 million. Nothing to sneeze at, but not quite $450 million. It also turns out that an offer of $15,000 is actually higher than the average standard or the industry standard for voice work like this. Complicating all of this are reports from an Axios reporter that the current SAG-AFTRA contract, so this is the union contract between voice actors and the union is actually being actively negotiated even as I speak, and the negotiations are ongoing for a new contract. So, as you can imagine, all of this publicity will inevitably affect these negotiations. So, the viewers who wrote to me asked me lots of really great questions, but I would say the easiest summation of them, and I'm sorry I can't answer all of them, is simply to say, what do I think of Taylor's strategy to go public, both the decision to do it and the way she did it? And also, what lessons can an ordinary person like you or me or other voice actors take from this? So that's what I'm going to take on here. And let me just say, in short, I would say that the decision to go public in the way that Helena Taylor did, from a negotiation strategy, was a ginormous fail for her. Now, let me be clear. That is not to say you would never bring a negotiation dispute over pay into the public eye. So if you stick around, I'm going to share with you the concrete steps I think Helena Taylor should have taken first. Then I'm going to offer you some questions that you should ask yourself before bringing a dispute over pay or frankly anything else into the public eye. So first, when someone is using their power, and that is arguably right what Platinum was doing here, using its huge leverage, instead of focusing on interests, what do you do? And what I want to say, the first move you want to do is do anything you can to try to reframe that conversation away from leverage and toward mutual and shared interests. Now, in fairness, it seems that Helena Taylor may well have tried to do that. She actually wrote to the CEO of Platinum to make her case, and she apparently made appeals to fairness and decency. And at least as she reports it, she didn't get much in response. So she may have felt stuck here, but I think there were more options than a series of destructive tweets. So the first of these, right, is if you're stuck writing letters, see if there's some way to change the mode of communication. Maybe she could have asked for an in-person meeting, or at least something over Zoom or phone, something better than an email or a letter. Now, let's say that doesn't work. The next thing you want to think about is, if we can't focus on interests, can I make appeals to criteria, to standards of legitimacy, or to fairness? So how do you do this? Well, that involves a fair amount of research, trying to understand what is appropriate for a particular market. Now, in this case, one of the challenges is that to the degree she was offered $15,000, that was quite above what the market would even suggest a video game actor might get paid for their voice talent. And you could see that by taking a look at some of the standard SAG rates from the last contract. Now, does that mean she can't make other appeals to criteria? She actually could. So for example, it turns out that in 2008, Michael Hollick, and you gamers will know who he is, he actually was the voice of Grand Theft Auto. And he was actually paid $100,000 over 15 months for his voice work in Grand Theft Auto 4. Now, while the Bayonetta game franchise isn't quite as big as the Grand Theft Auto one, this is actually 15 years later. It is a popular franchise, and she could have at least used some criteria like this to support herself for a higher salary. So let's say reframing the interest doesn't work. Let's say changing the mode of communication doesn't work. Let's say appeals to criteria or fairness don't work. What do you do then? Well, that's when you might think about bringing in some outside parties, but you want to be careful about who it is you're bringing in. So for example, in this case, Taylor might have identified the other voice actors on this game. Bayonetta 3 is not a one-woman show, and she could have thought about joining forces with them in a unified approach to get better wages from Platinum. So let me give you an example from the entertainment industry. This is actually from the popular TV program that many of you know and maybe even grew up with, called Modern Family. So this is basically an ensemble cast. And it turns out one of the actors, Ed O'Neill, was widely known. So the show definitely wanted to retain him. But for season 4, early on in the show, for the other actors, each of them was negotiating individually. And in an ensemble cast, it's actually quite easy for ABC to just kill off one of these actors and have the show go on. And so what the actors ended up doing, right, these 6 other actors actually came together and negotiated as a block, making it impossible for ABC to knock all of them off, because if they knocked all of them off, the show would essentially die. And this ended up being an extremely successful negotiation strategy, because in fact, those actors had their salaries raised from $105,000 per episode for season 3 to about $175,000 per episode for season 4. Now, even if Taylor couldn't have done that, there are probably others on the Bayonetta team that she could have reached out to for advice, who maybe would have had different ways of getting at the decision makers in pay. So all of these approaches are better than making a broad public appeal in the way Taylor did, because doing that almost is blowing up the bus or going nuclear. But let's imagine that you do want to make this public appeal. Even there are some key questions you should ask yourself. So first, if you're going to go public, can you demonstrate very clearly that the way you are being treated is really outside the realm of fairness if we look at criteria? Now, in this case, it would maybe seem that Taylor should get paid more. The $15,000 offer was not outside the kind of standard pay that voice actors get. So think about another example where an actress went public to great effect. Some of you may remember a few years ago the movie All the Money in the World, and it starred 2 A-list actors, Michelle Williams and Mark Wahlberg. And it turns out that parts of this film had to be reshot because Kevin Spacey was supposed to be a star, and then allegations of sexual harassment came before the movie was released. And so there's this decision to do a reshoot. And it turns out what happens is that Mark Wahlberg gets paid $1.5 million in addition to do the reboot. And you know how much Michelle Williams got? $1,000. That's right, $1.5 million? 1,000. These are 2 A-list actors, right? Michelle Williams is an Academy-nominated, extremely respected actress. In this case, going public made a lot of sense. And of course, her pay was immediately equalized. And in fact, Mark Wahlberg, who really had nothing to do with the pay inequity, ends up making a $1.5 million donation to the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. But in the case of Taylor here, that kind of inequity just wasn't in play. Now, secondly, if you are going to go public, you need to be really smart about it. And I would say there was a major way in which Taylor failed here. Because the decision to ask Bayonetta 3 fans, and I'm sure there are some of them watching here, to not actually buy the game and play it was actually asking them to sacrifice one of their interests, right? They were excited about the game. She says, oh, don't spend the money here, go boycott and give it to charity. That's nice, but I think it would have been much more effective to just say, hey, can you guys rally around me and sign a petition or lobby? But asking a third party to take a sacrifice, nice, but probably not necessary in a situation like this. So, third, if you're going to go public, you need to be honest, you need to be transparent, and you need to be prepared. If you're tweeting a video and hoping it's going to go viral, you better be darn sure you have your facts and you're being forthright. Because if not, someone's going to find out. And that is exactly what happened with Taylor, right? And so initially, she garners a huge amount of sympathy here. But as soon as Bloomberg does this report where it's clear that she's actually been offered $15,000, where it's not clear that her estimates around the profit were actually accurate, that $450 million number was off, she lost all of her credibility. And in losing her credibility, she also lost a lot of her negotiation leverage. So one of the most important things in negotiation, we don't say be wholly trusting, but be wholly trustworthy. And in this case, right, this kind of backfired. And so this leads to the final caution when it comes to going public. Because when you're going to bring in another party, you typically want to bring in a party that you have some ability to control. And one of the parties you really can't control is social media and going out to the media more broadly. When you make that decision, you cannot control the public. And so going to the media to publicly shame someone is just a high-risk game. And it turns out it kind of backfired because actually the media attention helped Platinum Games It turns out at the end of the first weekend of sales, so Bayonetta 3 is released on October 28th. At the end of that weekend, Bayonetta 3 has done exceedingly well in sales. It's actually ranked number 3 in game sales for a game that, frankly, had a niche market. So, while from a negotiation perspective, I certainly commend Taylor's instinct to try to improve her leverage and to negotiate a better deal for herself, she really made some critical lessons. So, the broader lessons here are that when you are lacking power or leverage in a negotiation, first, ask yourself, how can you appeal to the other side's interests and not over-focus on your lack of power? Second, are there some ways to change the method or mode of communication so you have some more direct person-to-person contact? Third, how can you harness criteria, standards of legitimacy, or fairness to your advantage? Fourth, if you're going to bring in outside players, think about who you could bring in who could form a stable coalitional partner. And lastly, if you are going to go public, only do that when all else fails. And if you do decide to do it, make sure that you do your homework, that you're transparent, and that the ask you ask of others is one that accounts for their interests. So for those of you interested in seeing me analyze another high-stakes negotiation, keep on watching this next video about WNBA player Brittany Griner and her ongoing captivity in Russia. Also, if you are a gamer and if you have some more items from the gaming world that you want me to analyze, please drop your thoughts in the comments below. Actually, anyone can drop their thoughts and suggestions in the comments below. Lastly, if you are new here, it would mean a lot to me if you would subscribe to my channel, hit the like button, and ring the bell. Thanks for watching. I'm Bob Bordone, and let's keep negotiating. Okay, you want to watch at least one more video before going back to gaming.